I'll try to help you guys talk about things to help you get the year started and give you kind of a timeline of what you should be doing throughout the year. So let's see. All right, so this is my first slide, is our kind of our overview timeline, the things that you need to be worried about. So the first thing that's going to come up is the annual audit. So whoever the current treasurer is should at this time or in June start preparing the books and records to be audited. And our financial year in PTA runs from July 1st through June 30th. So the audit can be done anytime after June 30th. I always like to get it done as soon as possible so that the books can be turned over to the new treasurer and you can start doing business in the new year. So as the treasurer, the new incoming treasurer, I always recommend that you sit on the audit committee. That way you know what the books look like, you know kind of what the different accounts and budget items have, so you know kind of familiarizes you with what all is involved in your financial situation. You will need to put together and meet with your budget committee in July or August. I always kind of like to, again, do it as early as possible to kind of get that budget started. Typically, anyone can be on the budget committee. Usually the executive committee, your officers will sit on that. And I always open it up to anybody who's interested in being part of the budget committee. It's important that everyone on the board knows and understands the budget. So, you know, it's nice if they'd sit in. But if they're not interested in being part of the committee, I always kind of send out do you have any budget requests? Do you think you need more money for your position this year, less money, that kind of thing, to kind of give you, excuse me, some numbers to work with while you're creating the budget. Then things that you'll be doing all year long, you have to prepare and present a monthly financial report at your board meetings. That's very important. That helps keep everyone informed on where you are financially, what kind of money you have and what's been spent. You also will need to do a financial report at each general meeting. And those aren't monthly typically. You have to have at least 3 general meetings per year. So those financial reports cover from one general meeting to the next general meeting. So it's going to cover a longer span of activity. But so you'll be doing monthly reports to your board and then reports at each general meeting. You should be updating your budget monthly with your what we call year-to-date amounts. So the actual amounts that you have spent or the income that you had come in, so you have an accurate picture of where you are financially, you know how much money you actually have to spend. Something that I always encourage treasurers, because people like the treasurer because you give them money. So you need to set some boundaries with your board, set some procedures for how they submit their reimbursement requests, how they submit deposits to you, how frequently you're going to be giving out checks. Don't be on call 24/7 or you're just going to drive yourself crazy. Set some boundaries. Like, I'll be up at the school on Tuesdays. If you have a reimbursement request, be sure it's in the box by Tuesday. And then I'll have checks ready by Thursday that you can pick up, something like that. You don't need to be on call, as I said, 24/7. You guys are volunteers, not getting paid to do this. So set some boundaries or they'll be bugging you all the time. Something that we kind of, I put this one in there because I tend to forget this. Be sure you're working with your membership chair to submit dues to Florida PTA monthly. Having worked at the county level, we kind of see when dues are getting paid, and we see quite a few schools where, you know, their dues don't get sit in until November or December or something like that. You should really be paying them monthly. Whatever memberships you collect each month, you should be paying those dues to Florida PTA that month. Then the big one, we'll talk about this some in the 2 sessions, are the 990 filing our taxes. Now, obviously, being a tax exempt organization, we don't pay taxes, but we do still have to file with the IRS every year. And because of our financial cycle being July 1st to June 30th, ours are due on November 15th. And we'll talk about how you know what level you have to file at a little farther in. But if you're a new treasurer coming in, it would be really nice if your current treasurer would get that taken care of before they leave, mostly because they know the records and they know this stuff. So talk real sweetly to them and say, could you, work on getting those taxes done before I have to take over. The Florida PTA audit form is a good resource to use on what needs to be in your records, because it has a checklist that the audit committee will go through to be sure everything's in there. So if you're not sure, you can go to the Florida PTA website, to the financial section, and you can find the audit form. And right on there, as I said, there's a checklist of everything that should be included in your record. So that's a good tool to have. So you make sure that you're keeping track of all that stuff and not having to scramble in June and pull it all together. And then you're, at the end of the year, you'll need to prepare financial records for your yearly audit. So the biggest part of your job is the day-to-day collecting, depositing money, the accounting part. That's the main part of your job. All right, so moving ahead, unless there are any questions. I know I should have introduced Emily. She's helping me out this morning. She'll let me know if you guys have questions as we go along. So I'm not very good at keeping track. I'm not good multitasking. Okay, so the first thing that we talked about that you're going to need to do is set up a budget, which is your unit's financial plan for the year. So the budget, you present it to your membership so they know what you're doing with the funds that you raise. Because remember, the money that you guys raise is your membership's money. It's not the board's money. So you have to have it approved by your membership for how you're going to use that money. And your budget, you have to keep in mind, your budget is a plan. It's not set in stone. So if somebody goes a little over, that's not the end of the world. That just means you can make adjustments and keep that in mind when you're planning for next year. Or if someone doesn't spend money in their account this year, then when you're planning the budget next year. So it's a plan. Nothing bad's gonna happen if it doesn't look exactly how you planned it at the beginning. Oops, I think this was oh, here we go. So here are some things to keep in mind as you're planning your budget, that all activities, all your programs, that kind of stuff should be focused on the PTA mission and purposes. Transparency is key. Everyone needs to be able to see the budget, understand what's in the budget, know what's being spent, what's being earned. You don't want anyone having questions about what you're doing with their funds. Okay, I guess I keep hitting the button twice. So all funds generated by PTA should be budgeted for purposes that advance PTA work. So, when you're setting your programs and stuff, you want them to be things that are, go towards your goals and what we do as a PTA. And the 3-to-1 rule, and this is an IRS thing. So whenever we come to you guys and say, well, you can't do this or you need to do this, especially related to finances, it's typically because it's something the IRS requires. And we're just sharing that information with you to keep you out of trouble with the IRS, because my quote is, I don't want to mess with the IRS. So if I can do everything with transparency, with best practices, then I'm not going to run into trouble with them. But the 3-to-1 rule is, for every fundraiser that you have, you should be providing 3 programs for your community, your school, your membership. So like if you do a candle fundraiser, from the money that you get for that, and other monies. It doesn't have to come from just one fundraiser. You should be providing 3 programs, which could be as simple as doing your welcome back breakfast for your teachers, or doing a STEM night or something like that. So the 3-to-1 rule is 3 programs for each fundraiser. Okay, and then your budget has to be approved by your membership. It's not approved by the board. So my typical process is I'll meet with the budget committee. We'll come up with a proposed budget. I always take it to the board and have them look it over, especially the chairs, to see if they want to make any changes to any of the line items before we take it to the membership. So typically in August or September, you'll have your first general meeting, and that's where you get your budget approved. And you cannot make any changes to your budget without getting it approved by your membership. So you can't just say, oh, I think we need more money here in the scholarship line. Can we just shift some stuff around? No, you cannot, unless you plan on taking that to your general membership to approve. So you can't just move things around. Once it's approved, that's what they're expecting you to do. That's the plan that they're saying, okay, we're good with you doing that. All right, so your budget committee, I talked about this a little, so maybe treasurer is the chair for the budget committee. Unless your standing rules say differently, your elected officers will be on the committee. And as I said, I like to open it up to anybody who's interested, because everyone needs to be involved and understand what our budget is about. Your executive committee could appoint them if they don't want to be the budget committee. They could appoint members to be on the committee, usually 3 to 5. You don't want too many, because then you get too many chefs in the kitchen kind of thing. And that I talk about, get input from your committee chairs. Like, how much money do you want this year? Or, what's your wish? I could have this much money. Give them what you think you can manage. And then you use previous budgets as a guideline. So, get the last couple of years' budgets and kind of look at, because by the end of the year, they should have what we actually spent compared to what we had planned to do. And that kind of gives you a guideline on how to get started. And it doesn't have to be the same as previous budgets, but it's kind of gives you, it gives you some information on how much we spent here. Maybe we don't want to do that program anymore. Maybe we're going to change the fundraiser, but it gives you an idea of what's worked or hasn't worked in the past. And then, as I said, I always present the plan to the executive board before we take it to the membership.
We have a question, Mary.
Yes.
Does the budget committee need to be voted on during the last general meeting?
No, because it can be, as it says here, it can either be appointed by your executive committee, your officers, or the treasurer can just ask for volunteers, but it's not an elected committee.
And we also have, when the new treasurer, when can they get involved with the process?
I would go ahead and start talking and working with the current treasurer just to kind of get some ideas. I mean, you can't officially do things until after the books have been audited. I mean, you can't do treasurer kind of things. Never, never, never. And I saw someone came in mid-year, I think at Sanford. Never take over somebody else's books until they've been audited, because you don't want to take over any issues that might have been there. So anytime there's a change in treasurers, the books need to be audited before the transition takes place. So you can start talking to your treasurer and kind of, like getting recommendations, seeing what kind of forms they use, that kind of thing. But until the books have been audited and handed over to you, you can't do any official treasurer business. That was a good question. All right, so developing a budget. So you need to consider what your goals in the resources that you have, you know, what kind of funding are you going to be able to get through the years. Talked about this a little bit. I'll probably repeat myself a lot, but there's so much to treasure that it doesn't hurt to keep saying things over again. Look at last year's budget, a couple of years' budgets, see how it worked, what didn't work, and make those changes. Talked about the 3-to-1 rule, and you'll hear that a lot in different trainings, not even just in treasurer, because that's the big one. Because you have, sometimes you have units that do fundraising, you know, and are not providing the programs that they should be doing. Okay, this one comes, I don't know quite why I put this in here, but this one kind of comes up every year because it always seems like there's a family or a teacher that maybe has a loss of some sort, and they come to PTA wanting, you know, can you help fundraise for this family? And you know, you want to do something to help the family, but as a PTA, because of our designation, we cannot fundraise for like an individual or, you know, just a family for that. So you need to be very careful when they come asking. You can say, well, yes, we can help organize things, you know, we can help you guys put things together, but we can't run funds through our PTA to help with this. Now, you as PTA board members could do a collection on the side. Like we just had a student that passed away at our high school. So our board members all chipped in money to get flowers to send to for the memorial service, but it's not PTA funds that was spent on that. But as a PTA, we wanted to show support for the family. So we did that. So this one comes up every year because there's always, it seems like there's always, you know, somebody who has some struggles, and quite frequently the PTA will be asked. So the best way we can help is to help organize, set up meal trains, figure out ways to put things together, you know, events together, but no funds can run through our accounts. Okay, so your budget should show any funds that you're carrying over, and you should have some carryover because you're going to have summer expenses. And we'll talk about that. Those are your interim funds. And you need those because you can't technically spend any of your money until that budget has been approved by your general membership. But since that doesn't happen until August or September, you have to have a little money to do the welcome back breakfast or the Yahoo Boohoo breakfast, or, you know, the things that you do over the summer. So you have a little interim budget that you set up to cover those expenses until you can get your budget approved. So that's what your carryover is for. You know, what do you think you're going to raise? And what do you think you're going to spend? There we go. Be sure to include some people call it the summer budget, but for that period between July 1st and whenever you have your first general membership meeting to approve the budget, you know, you have some funds set up for those activities. Okay, so this is a sample of our budget that we use. I just do everything in Excel because our budget is not huge. As I was just talking to Emily earlier, we don't have as much business. A lot of, local unit PTAs sometimes purchase software like Quicken or Quickbooks or something like that. And you can definitely do that. I just use Excel because it's free for me. We have it. Or Google Sheets you could use. So this is the income section. And in ours, we have a couple of designated accounts. So it's money that has been given to us for a specific purpose. So if you see in the budget here, it starts with the carryover amount. So this is the amount that we had left from last year. Our general account is the money that we can spend for our programs and all that kind of stuff. Then the two you see below that, and this, most of you guys won't have stuff like this, but in case it comes up, if you guys decide to do, you know, like we're going to raise money to build a new playground, that happens a lot in elementary schools. That's going to be something that your membership approves. And when you're doing fundraising event specifically for that, that's a designated fund. So whatever's donated for that has to be spent on that. So it kind of needs to be kept separate from the rest of the money. So we have Prevention Coalition, which we get donated money from Seminole County Prevention Coalition, and we do grants throughout the year for our units. And then we do a scholarship fund. So a lot of the units will donate money towards our scholarships. And again, that's designated because that money is being expected to be spent on scholarships. So I keep that separate from the general stuff. And then you see a breakdown of the different places that we expect to get income. And then I have it broken down at the bottom for the designated accounts. And this year we hoped to get some national PTA grant money, which we did not. So when we made our budget changes, we took that out. So that's kind of a breakdown of the income. So I'm going to assume next that I have the expenses up. All right. I didn't realize I had little notes. All right. So just be specific. You know, don't have too many like big general accounts. You know, like just fundraising. If you do more than one fundraiser, you should have a line for each fundraiser, you know, like candle fundraiser, wrapping paper fundraiser. So make it specific to where the money's coming from. And you're going to need to include a line for your membership, keeping in mind that some of that membership money has to go to Florida PTA. Okay, I think I just mentioned that. Okay, so yeah, I give some suggestions. Definitely need membership dues. Donations is always helpful. Grants, box tops. A lot of elementary schools do box tops. Yeah, so wherever you think you're going to get money, include that in your income. All right, so then the expense section is broken down, you know, by where you're going to be spending your money. So I usually have an administrative line, which is for those incidental things like postage, having to, you know, whatever you might have to spend money to run your PTA. That's not specific to a program. And then you would list your different programs. And I always say have a couple of line items that are a little more vague. So it gives you some flexibility on spending where you don't have to go back to your membership to change. So I might have a programs line that's just programs, not specific, in case an idea comes up that somebody said, oh, maybe we should try this year. That's not something we've done before. So that gives us flexibility to do it without having to go back to the general membership to approve it. Whereas programs that I know we're going to do, like scholarships at the high school, we have a scholarships line. So I have a separate line. It's a program for us, but I know it's a specific one we're going to do. We did a wellness night. So, but always leave a couple of kind of more general items in there to give you a little flexibility on your spending, or else you're going to have to wait and do a general membership meeting every time you want to change something. And then you can see at the bottom in the blue is our interim funding, what we plan to spend over the summer. So for us, it's mostly leadership conference stuff and the post office box that we rent, because we're not at a school. We have to do post office box. So your expenses should not be more than your income, right? You shouldn't spend more than you make. So a lot of these are going to be stuff I just talked about. Yeah, and if your bank charges any kind of fees, you might want to have a fee line. Now, the goal is that your income and your expenses match, but I know, especially because of COVID, a lot of people had more carryover because they didn't get to do like 5th grade events or 8th grade events or whatever. So it was a little higher than for some schools than it maybe would have been. So, you know, your expenses might be a little less from that year, or you might spend a little more because you know you had more to do. So typically though, your expenses shouldn't be more than your income, but they don't have to be exactly the same, but you want it to be close, because the goal is to spend what you make in that year. So when I make, you know, whatever money we make this year, we should be trying to spend this year. I don't know if there
I
was
have
a
a
question.
question. Could you give an example of a general expense, and then at what point would you then want to classify it?
Okay, so like I said, for programs, in our budget, we have a line that just says programs. It doesn't specify what type of program. So we have a wellness committee, and we came up with the idea to do a mental health night, which wasn't something that we had planned for over the summer. So we were able to use funds from that programs line, even though we didn't have a specific line for this mental health night that we did. The administrative expenses line is kind of a general thing. You know, like if you have an expense and it doesn't quite fit in everywhere else, you can probably justify it in your administrative cost line. Like we need a new file cabinet for our financial records or something like that. So yeah, and really hospitality or staff appreciation is kind of general, because that gives you flexibility to do different things throughout the year for your staff or hospitality, where you might not know specifically, you know, I'm going to do this then and that then kind of thing. Does that help?
And then we also have another question. Why do you have to spend it all? There is an accounting issue, or maybe related to IRS rules.
Well, I don't know if it's specific to IRS, but that's kind of the purpose. And I know some of you guys might know, like Girl Scouts is the same way, or any kind of organization where you're spending funds, because that money was approved by this year's membership. You can't really commit next year's membership to it. So it doesn't look very good unless you're doing something like a playground where, you know, it's going to take you a few years to collect that money. This budget that you've created for this year is for this year, and you can't commit next year's board and membership to what you guys did this year, because they're a different group of people. They might have different goals and responsibilities. So the goal is to try to spend what you make, unless, like I said, you have a designated fund that might take a few years to accomplish. So that's why you kind of keep that separate. So hopefully that clarified. All right, and then I kind of mentioned in the timeline about your budget year to date. So once the budget is approved, so this was our approved budget for this year, and then after my first financial report, now this is not my treasure report. This is not what I present each month, but I will go through and if you look at the far right column, those have my actual amounts. So in that month, we had $149 in donations, $350 in dues, $1,900 in sponsorship, so forth and so on. So that helps everybody see where they are with their budget. Now, as a chairperson and as a treasurer, I tell my chair people this, that you should be also keeping your own account balance, you know, keeping track on your own, so that we can check and be sure everything matches up. Because sometimes as a treasurer, when we get requests, we're not always sure where it needs to be categorized. Sometimes, especially if we're a new treasurer and we're not as familiar with the items, and sometimes we might stick something in a different category than it should be. So it's always good to have your chair people kind of keep track of their income and expenses, so they can kind of verify that with you, to make sure you guys have the same records. But this way you know exactly where you are in your budget each month, because you can't spend money that you don't have. Because I did have a local unit talking about their budget. They were wanting to spend some money because they were budgeted money, and you know, like they had a line item. They said, but we have such and such in our budget. And I said, but you don't have that money in your account. You know, you don't have enough money to cover that. So that's why it's important to keep the year to dates, so you know where you are, how much money you actually have to spend, or what you have actually already spent, so you can, you know, make sure you don't go over your budget.
And then we have a question. When you have a carryover, where is it coming from?
typically carryover should be about the same from year to year. So this 4760 that we had carryover is essentially the carryover from the year before and the year before. So it's money there, so we have it during the interim for spending, and hopefully make enough that we can carry that same amount over. So your carryover is kind of you're still spending it, but it's technically going into the next year. So that's why we always try to keep it about the same as it is from year to year, because you know about what you have to spend each summer. What's the time here? Okay, we're good. Uh-oh, did I look at blank? No, here we go. Okay, so as a treasurer, you're responsible for tracking all the actual income and expenses and providing that information to your board monthly. Any changes to the budget have to be approved by your membership. Always, one of your general memberships is typically in January or February after the mid-year. That's a good time to go back and look at and see, do we need to make any adjustments? We didn't really spend this money here, so maybe we can move it here. And then, because you'll be having your general meeting. We talked a little bit about restricted funds. Think hard about that before you commit to that, especially if it's something that's going to be going over several years. But with restricted funds, it's typically you're going to people and saying, if you give us, if the money we earn for this is going to this specific thing, whereas a lot of fundraising just goes into the general fund and can be used for any program. So, you really have to be careful keeping track of those, because people are expecting you to spend that money on what you said you're going to spend that money.
So we have a question. Are you allowed to be the treasurer if you work for the district, or is that a conflict of interest?
We discourage that just for looks, but it is not allowed. It can be, but we really try to discourage that and try to find somebody who's not a district employee, but it's not forbidden. Just, you have to be, if you are an employee, I think you want to be super, super transparent about everything, because we don't want it to be a conflict of interest of you're more concerned about the interest of the school over the interest of the PTA. Because although the PTA works closely with the school, we are a totally separate entity and not under the control of the school. So our choices are based on our missions and goals, which for the most part align with the mission and goals of the school. Okay, so in your financial record keeping, what you need to be making sure you keep a running ledger, income expenses, so you know what your bank balance, what your true bank balance is. Also keep a running balance in your checkbook. So sorry, my cat just jumped on my lap. So I have my Excel ledger that I keep, and I also keep the balance running in my checkbook. So I have it in two places, but I like the electronic ledger because it's easier to check, to reconcile things at the end of the year. Make sure that your people are completing their reimbursement forms and not you, because a lot of times they'll tend to want to just throw receipts at you, sorry, and expect you to do the paperwork. Don't do that. It doesn't look good if all the paperwork's in your handwriting, and plus you don't have time to be doing that. Sometimes you have to be not mean, but you need to be firm. It's not your responsibility to complete all their paperwork for them. You can say, you won't get a check until the paperwork's completed, and where's original receipt should come to us. Be sure you have deposit forms for every deposit. Reconcile your bank statements with your ledger each month. I talked about, using that audit form as a way to help you know what records you should have. And you can maintain an online bank account access, which is really nice now because it's easy to go on, especially with like Member Hub and all the electronic stuff we do now. It's easier to kind of help keep track of that. So you kind of have to find what works for you with your record keeping, but you try to be organized as much as possible. It's really hard for the audit committee to come in if you haven't kept things kind of organized to go through and check everything. Plus, as we said, our biggest goal is financial transparency. We want somebody to be able to come and look at our stuff and know where we are and know that we're doing everything properly and with best practices. Okay, and then I think I mentioned monthly treasurer's reports. So this is the format that I use for my treasurer reports. And it will probably look a little different than yours because, as I said, we kind of have three accounts that we go from. But your monthly report should show the income and expenses from each month. It's not from July through October or July through November. We want to see each month's activity, what was spent, what was earned, that kind of thing. So if you look at mine, at the top is the balance from the previous meeting, the last time we met. And then, as I said, I have the 3 accounts. So our general balance, you see the income, I list where the income came from, the expenses, what the expenses were each month, and then the new balance. Then our Prevention Coalition is one of our accounts. So we had gotten a donation at that point. We had no expenses. And then our scholarship. And then at the bottom is the new balance at that time. So you guys all know you have bank accounts. So you know that your bank balance does not always match up with your book balance because sometimes you have checks that are out that haven't been cleared, that kind of thing. So this balance on this report is my book balance. This is what I say we have right now based on the checks that I've written, the income that's come in. If I were to look at my bank account right there, it's probably not going to say that same number because I know there are a couple people who have not cashed checks yet. But this gives me a true idea of what money we have because I've already accounted for everything that's come in or gone out. And I think I see some questions. All right, sweetie. Is there a question or no? Okay. Oh, look, I somehow hit talking. Now, oh no, I did that. All right. Let's stop here for a moment. And does anyone have any questions or want to?
Let's see. So for the end of the year, do we need to show a monthly balance and end of year balance sheet, or will an end of year balance sheet suffice?
Okay, for the end of the year balance sheet will be fine. That's what they're going to need for the audit. And actually, let me get out of this for a minute. Let me show you guys what my ledger looks like. Okay, so this is what, as I said, I use Excel to keep track. So this is what my ledger looks like, my running balance. So all of this at the top was what was not, what was outstanding at the time of the audit. So when you do the audit, it should be done from July 1st to June 30th. So there might be some transactions that occur after that. I mean, you might not do your audit until August 1st. any transactions that happen from July 1st to August 1st, that should not be in the audit. And that's where people sometimes run into trouble when they're doing their audit, is accounting for stuff that should not have been in that time period. And then it gets either double counted or not counted at all. But anyway, so, you know, it's basically just like a checkbook register. The date of the transaction, what type of transaction, who was paid, or who made, you know, who gave us money, where it fits in the budget, the line item matches up to the budget. Description, because sometimes they might come back to you with a question about what was that spent for, why would, you know, so, you know, nice notes so you can go back and say, oh yeah, that check was for such and such. And then, you know, expenses, income, you can see I reconcile my bank statement, you know, keep my little notes out to the side to help me to remember what I included in each month's report, so I don't overlap. And then I was checking some stuff there. And then I keep a separate little ledger for my scholarship fund, and then a separate little ledger for our prevention coalition. So when we do our audit in July, this will be very helpful for the audit committee to check, you know, to reconcile with the bank statements what we did each month. And then since it's in Excel, I can total them up at the bottom, so I can get the total income, total expenses with a simple click of the button. And it really helps with the math on the audit too. So that's just what my ledger looks like. If you're using QuickBooks or Quicken or something like that, it's going to look a little different, but you should be able to get the same information from it.
Yes, and I know we use Casper Elementary uses QuickBooks, and you're able to get QuickBooks for the year for $75 through TechSoup.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, that's not bad.
That's what we did. And I'm not sure if this is a rule, but I know once July 1st hits and the audit starts, that we do not spend any money.
Yeah, it's not a hard, fast rule, but it does make it easier to track things. Because typically right then you probably shouldn't be spending money anyway, but you're going to come now, like at the high school, we tend to do our like scheduled pickup and stuff like that a little earlier, because they don't do it the week before school starts. They do it a couple of weeks ahead of time. So sometimes we have to spend some money a little sooner, and that's, you know, part of our interim budget. But yeah, you try not to spend money, but at some point you're going to have to, because we get spirit apparel and stuff like that. Oh, Teresa was asking about where do you find the
TechSoup.
Yep, anywhere we can save money is nice, because you hate to spend a lot of money for that, and that's a good administrative expense, is paying for the software.
And if you have a lot of money coming in and going out, I would definitely recommend QuickBooks. It makes it very easy and very clean and easy to show where your money is coming and going.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you can match it up directly with your budget, right? I think I used it at one of the elementary schools. So once you set your budget in QuickBooks, then it's very easy to account, as Emily's saying, you know, your money income going out, matching it up with your budget line items. It's a little more work for me in Excel because I have to do that myself. Okay, I was trying to save about half of my presentation for the second half of the treasure thing. So, see where I am. Yeah, we're at the halfway point. I know it's a very overwhelming job to take over the treasurer position, because it is one of those jobs where you are constantly doing something. You know, like some of it, like reflections, kind of has you start here and you're pretty much done at this point. You know, treasurer is a year-round job, but I like it because it gives me an insight into everything that's going on in my unit. I know who's doing what and when, because they're always having to get in touch with me about financial questions or getting reimbursed, that kind of thing. So I like it, that it gives me the overview of the whole work, everything that happens. And I know you guys don't want to hear this, but it's also a good transition position to president, because you know everything that's going on in your unit and who's doing what, and who keeps up with stuff and who doesn't keep up with stuff. So got a lot of good information as treasurer, but it's also a big responsibility, because you're responsible for all the financials and making sure everything is done properly and accounted for properly. And if they're going to come looking, if there are ever any questions, then they're going to be looking at you. So you do want to always be transparent about everything, keep very good and clear records. A fantastic resource for treasurers, and it's worth the time. I know it sounds like, but the kit of materials includes the treasurer's manual, and I meant to have that open for you today. It's called Dollars and Cents, and everything that I talk about today, almost everything you could think of, you have a question about, is in there. And so it's very worth the time as a treasurer to go through and look through that. It'll talk about gift cards, it'll talk about that charitable class donations, it talks about restricted funds, filing your tax. Yes, Helen, let me see, give me a minute to get that up, get that link for you. And they will, Florida PTA will send that out to you, but it's probably won't be until end of July, because they don't usually send it out until after leadership conference, but I'll send you the link for this year's. All board members are responsible for the financial integrity of your unit, especially in things making sure forms are completed and turned in on time. Tracking their income and expenses, that kind of stuff. So the treasurer's the main person, but everyone's responsible for the proper care and use of your financials. Okay, I finally got the link. I will put it in the chat box. And then since I have it up on my screen, I'll go ahead and share it real quick. All right, so it's digital now. It's just a big PDF form. It used to be paper. So if we look at the table of contents, you can kind of see, first 30 days as treasurer, how to get you started. Talk about a lot of this, the budgeting stuff I covered, fundraising, allocating funds. Oh yes, insurance. Don't forget insurance. Then some best practices for handling money. Keeping your records, the fiduciary responsibility, protecting your funds, banking. We can do a lot of electronic commerce now. You can do, we use Square for our transactions, Member Hub. Everyone has to have their Member Hub account set up with the Stripe payment. Just about anything we can do now. And then, revenue expenses, raffles is always a big thing. How can you do that? We can do raffles, but how can we do them correctly and legally? Specific to Florida things, our tax exempt certificate is not a national thing. That comes from the state of Florida. So your tax exempt form is a state thing, because it's state taxes that we're exempt from. And those are good for like 5 years. When yours is coming up due to be renewed, the state of Florida will contact you to let you know what you need to do. Then it talks about the audit, filing taxes, that kind of stuff. So I'm telling you, great information in there. I wouldn't sit down and try to read it in one day, but kind of go through and find the areas of interest to you.